Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome once again to the United Regional Chamber's weekly update. We try to bring you on some interesting guests and some interesting subjects. And today I'm very happy to bring on Patricia Lyons-Bousquet. She owns CompLyonsHR Consulting. Patty, how are you?
Yes, I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Well, um, with all the crazy changes and everything that's going on with the big beautiful bill and everything between the feds and the state, we're just going to kind of clarify a little bit. But first off, tell us a little bit about Patty.
So, I have been in the HR world for about 34 years. I did 20 years of internal HR, and then the last 13, 14, I've been consulting, and 2 years ago decided to go out on my own and launch Compliance HR Consulting, and it's been wonderful so far.
Well, we have your great asset, Alexandra, who comes to a
Yeah.
lot of our meetings, and you've been to one or two. So I'm going to jump right into it and just going to ask you some questions, and hopefully that you can help some of our small businesses clarify some of this craziness that's going on. So right now, what are some of the biggest mistakes that small businesses are making regarding HR?
I would say things like not classifying employees correctly as either exempt and non-exempt can really cause some issues. It's not what the employee wants to be. It's not to be used as a tool to avoid overtime. It isn't purely based on the person's title. It's got to be it has to do with their salary. It's actually a three-part test that a position or a role needs to meet in order to be effectively considered an exempt level employee. So oftentimes that's done wrong, and that can lead to some issues. Another thing that we see is misclassification of either W-2 or 1099 employees. That's another one where I hear all the time, well, they want to be an independent contractor. Well, unfortunately, as the employer or the company that they're contracting with, the onus is on you to make sure those are employed, are classified accurately. So those are some of the big ones. Another thing that I see is errors with I-9s, and they may seem minimal, but the fines associated with that can be really significant, up to $2,200 per field per day. And if you're making the same mistake over and over with your employees, it really adds up. So that's some of the main things that we're still seeing.
Well, tell us a little, first off, what is an I-9 for
So
lay people like me?
an I-9 form is a form that all employees must complete on there's some rules around it, but by their first day of employment, and that shows that they are eligible to work in the United States.
Okay.
So it shows they are who they are and that they're eligible to work in the United States. And the employee has to fill out section 1 of that between the date they receive an offer of employment to their first day of work, no later than that. And then the employer has 3 days to certify that. So there's documentation that they get from the employee. They fill it out. It has to be filled out properly on section 2 of the form. And then there's record retention requirements around that. Another big mistake that's made is those are generally, we see that they're kept in employees' main files, and they shouldn't be in there. They should be in a separate folder or a separate binder. So it's, there's a lot of complexities around it.
And a lot of small businesses are just not accustomed to having to do things like that. And that put them at risk. And speaking of that, what is the greatest risk exposure for a small business?
Obviously there's a lot of things, but handling employee relations poorly is a huge area of exposure. It can lead to things like discrimination suits, wrongful termination if it's a termination. So really, the biggest thing I see is the avoidance of difficult conversations. And what that leads to is you're tolerating something, and then finally it hits a point where it's too much and an employer wants to just terminate an employee and there's no backup, there hasn't, hasn't been, you haven't fairly discussed it with the employee and given them an opportunity to improve it. So that can lead to a lot of risk. The other thing is there's cost to turnover. So there's an
Yeah.
impact to your bottom line as well. I mean, if you've gone through the process of hiring someone and hopefully you've done your due diligence in that process, you really want to help them to become a valuable, productive employee.
Right, because as you just mentioned, the cost alone of going through all that and then having to find their replacement and the loss of business, it can be significant.
Absolutely. And
Well,
more so now.
if I'm a small business owner, what should I do if I'm concerned about compliance with employment law? What's the best thing for me to do?
So, I mean, the best thing to do would be to engage with an HR consultant. An HR consultant will make sure you have the tools you need and the knowledge you need to be in compliance. And, it's difficult. You're running a business, you're a small business, you need to run your business in order to survive. So you can't be doing that and worrying about these things. So it really helps to take some of the pressure off the business owner or the manager or whoever it is that's been given this responsibility. And to add to that, when you've got multiple states involved, it becomes even more difficult. So I would definitely be working with a professional in the area.
Well, what are some of the most pressing employment law issues right now?
Um, there's immigration stuff that's a concern. There is, again, the employee relations piece. So I say we've got kind of two kinds. We get clients from two different ways. We've got clients that look at it and say, I'm scared that I'm not in compliance. I don't want to get in trouble, so I'm going to reach out and get my HR in order. So that's very proactive. But then we get clients who call us when they've received a letter from an attorney, a letter from the attorney general's office, or contacted by an employee's attorney about something being wrong. So then we get the kind of like the oh no, break the glass in case of emergency calls.
No.
So that's being having good employee relations policies and at least a procedure and a process for handling those can really help avoid some of that.
Well, let's take a step back for a second. Why do I-9s have to be in a separate folder or a separate binder?
Because of the nature of the information. Well, number one, because the government says so. I mean, that's
Okay.
the bottom line. But there is protected information that's on an I-9 form that those who don't have a need to know shouldn't have access to. So if you keep it in a regular folder, the regular employees folder, and the supervisor comes in and says, I want to see Joe's last performance evaluation, and you give them the folder, now you're giving them access to information that they shouldn't otherwise have access to. So there's a whole record keeping system that we recommend, that you have an employee's regular folder, then you have a medical folder, because along with the information that's on the I-9 form, there's things that could be on doctor's notes, on leave request paperwork. If there's state disability or disability policy, there's information on that paperwork that also shouldn't be accessible. So certain things really need to be kept separate and confidential and locked in cabinets, things like that.
Okay. What should employers do when navigating if you've got to terminate somebody?
Mm-hmm.
I know this is a very touchy field right now.
So documentation is key. You want to make sure that along the way you've documented all the conversations, and it shouldn't. I mean, we're at will states around here. There's only one state in the country that's not at will, and that's fine. But there are a lot of exceptions to the at will doctrine, so it can't be discriminatory. You don't want to behave in a way that the general public would find that to be offensive. So you want to make sure that you're documenting everything, that you're having constructive conversations with your employees, and you're really giving them the opportunity to make an improvement. If they don't make an improvement, then you can certainly take action. Now, that's not to say that there are some things that are so egregious you move immediately to termination. And I like the corrective action process, so that you can take appropriate corrective action based on what the scenario is.
And tell us, you mentioned earlier about these difficult conversations. Is that what you meant when you like giving somebody a warning, or so that they have their paperwork in their file? So in case something like this happens, you have the backup that you need.
Right. Exactly. I mean, it's one of the hardest things managers and leaders do, is have those difficult conversations. And most people like to avoid them, and they hope that whatever they're seeing, a behavior that they're seeing, a performance issue that they're seeing, will resolve itself. And a lot of times it doesn't, because no one's ever told the person that it's wrong or needs to be improved.
And then it kind of builds up, and all of a sudden, the employer gets to the end of their rope and they say, okay, forget it, you're done. That can create some legal issues.
Absolutely. So what we look at is that, there's the saying in HR, if it's not documented, it didn't happen. So, I mean, just an example, when I was internal HR, a manager would come to me and say, I have had it with this person. I want to let them go. And I say, okay, well, what did their last performance evaluation say? Well, 6 months ago, they got a performance evaluation that said everything was great. And have you given any warnings or had any coaching conversations? And they say, no, I was hoping it would change. Well, now you've got exposure to the organization if you just move towards termination. And again, sometimes that's appropriate. Other times it's not. And what we do is we manage that risk with companies. So there are companies that are more comfortable with a higher risk level and say, I'm okay making that move. And there's others that say, no, we want to make sure we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's. So we work with them where they are.
Well, how about a few tips about keeping the right paperwork, keeping the right records, for all employees?
So, I mean, again, if you have internal HR, they should be doing their research. If you're working with an HR consultant, they should be able to give you some record keeping recommendations. But at a minimum, I would I would get online and look at sites like sherm.org is a great site, or some states have different record keeping requirements. Federal has record keeping requirements. So really doing your homework and your due diligence to make sure you're doing what you can to be as compliant as is reasonable.
Well, fortunately for us here at the Chamber, you and Greg are going to come to Morin's on the 20th of November to hold an HR panel. And we're opening this up to any business. You don't have to be a Chamber member to do this. But if you have any questions, there's some basics that Patty and Greg are going to go over, but then they're there to answer those questions that you might have that in the gray area, something you're not quite sure of. And Patty will be able to show you the right way compared to if you're making a mistake and how you can correct it going forward.
Mm-hmm. And we'll make sure that we bring some resources and tools that people can walk away with that will help them if they've got any concerns around this.
All right, and just to reiterate, it'll be on November 20th at 8:30 in the morning. We'll be in the back room there at Morin's. Patty and Greg are gracious enough to come to answer all these questions. And, it's being sponsored by the Chamber, and Morin's is going to jump in there as well. So, Patty, as we get to the close, any final tips that you have for some of our small businesses?
I think really understand the risks around certain things. There can be a lot of exposure. I think it's important to really have an assessment done, see where your exposure is, and then to make educated decisions around that.
Okay. Well, Patty, thanks for taking the time to come on the show today. Truly appreciate it. I guess I screwed up a little bit and didn't send Greg the invitation. He'll be mad at me, but there's a lot of people that get mad at me.
He will make up for it at the event, I assure you. He is a
Okay.
wealth of, and what's great is you'll get a little bit of, what I'm seeing in our practice, which is, more day-to-day stuff, and he can speak to what he's seeing on the legal side, which is, going past what we do. I mean, ideally, you want us to be effective, so you don't, it's like an if not us then him. So
Right.
ideally you want to you want to stop with us, but he can speak to things that people do wrong and how to avoid those.
Yeah, we're not trying to take any business away from Greg, but we're
Oh
trying to
gosh,
stop
no.
you from, having to go in and hire an attorney. And that both of you are a wealth of knowledge.
Great.
So, Patty, thank you very much. Hang tight for a minute. Folks, thank you. We appreciate you coming to see us during the week. Big shout out to Jim Jones and the team over there at AACS. And next week, we have a guest coming on to talk about little forests in Attleboro. That should be rather interesting. But again, folks, thank you very much, and we hope everybody stays safe.